Hello guys, welcome to Redditor's Revenge. Here we post amazing revenge stories daily. And if you want more content like this, please do subscribe to the channel and stay tuned with us. Moving on to our today's story, about the revenge OP took on his crazy and manipulative uncle who was adamant to destroy OP and his mother's life because he was jealous of them. Now story. Everyone has a crazy uncle, but mine is a special kind of crazy. My uncle is the kind the entire family is embarrassed by, and no one wants him around for family gatherings. Every year, we all pray that he doesn't come and discuss his weird political and societal views with the rest of the family. For example, because he's an extreme right-wing, anything he deems slightly strange or new he automatically blames on the left and the degrading society. It's safe to say that he was never the most popular person. One time, we all had a family gathering and he came around. He liked to target every single young person in the family with lame comments. For example, he kept pointing out that my long hair was curly and that I needed to buzz it off like a man. When I explained to him that this was a very dated mindset, he would start going crazy and cursing our entire generation and saying that we were all spoiled brats. We used to argue with him at first, but then our parents told us to just leave him be and let him keep saying whatever, since no one takes him seriously anyway. In that same gathering, he set his sights on my cousin who was older than me and had just gotten divorced. He started getting so personal and asking her why all of this happened, and when she told him, he started defending her ex-husband, who was a horrible person and an alcoholic. She got so heated that day that she yelled at him and started crying and left the entire gathering early because she couldn't stand the sight of him. Another time, it was during my older brother's wedding. He showed up and started sitting in places he wasn't supposed to sit. He met someone whom he thought was our cousin and started bad-mouthing the bride's family and saying that they were cheap and just married my brother for money, even though he wasn't rich in the slightest. This sparked a massive fight between both families, and it all started because of him. It got so bad that my brother personally kicked him outside of the wedding because he was making everyone angrier. Because he wasn't very social, his war zone was Facebook. He would argue politics so much on Facebook and spend hours getting into fights in the comments with family members and people he didn't even know. His views were so extreme that one time, one of our aunts legitimately wanted to report him to the police out of fear of his extreme views. The thing is, he just wanted to be different and be against the norm, so if everyone likes person X, he would hate him, and if everyone hated him, he would like him. His hypocrisy showed so often, and when people called him out on it in his posts, he would block whoever commented, and it got to the point where he blocked his nieces. Still, we were all forced to have him over in our gatherings because of my grandmother and grandfather, who were his parents. They always defended him and asked him to just excuse his strange views and ideas. One time, he came over for dinner and it was the day before my exams. He started going nuts over these conspiracy theories that he believed in. He believed in literally every conspiracy theory ever, and he would start telling me about the secret organizations that run the world and the crazy evil machinations of billionaires and the secret underground societies made up of green people. He was nuts sometimes, and that night, he kept talking to me nonstop about these things and wouldn't let me get up to go study until I got angry at the end, and when I slightly raised my voice that I needed to go, he got offended and told me that he was helping to teach and enlighten me. What annoyed me was that any time my grandparents were there, they would always blindly defend him. After that one time, he started sending me a crazy amount of conspiracy theory videos and explanations about everything in life, from politics to fast food to cars to medicine. He was so convinced that someone was out there pulling strings and being evil that he acted insane sometimes. These antics were the reason his wife left him after only 6 months of marriage years ago, and why he has been single and living a miserable life working in retail even though he was 47 years old. The absolute worst thing he had ever done though was during my school's graduation. I was waiting for this moment my entire life, and it was supposed to be the perfect day. The entire family was invited and everyone was also excited. The ceremony was going to start at 7, but everyone went there at 6 to start preparing and meeting everyone. My family members who attended were my older sister, my brother, my parents, my crazy uncle, and my grandparents. I was so terrified that he would do something, especially since we were in front of my teachers and classmates. I didn't want to be embarrassed in front of everyone. I decided to stay away from my family as much as possible after first greeting them, though, and spent most of the time with my classmates and teachers. Anytime I would see my uncle approaching, I would quickly come up with an excuse and go to the bathroom or over to my principal or whatever. I saw him from afar talking to some of the teachers and staff though and got worried, especially when one of the female teachers gave him a strange look and was about to yell at him, and I went over and grabbed him away at the last second. When I asked him what happened, he told me that he just complimented her, which meant he was being inappropriate. My uncle and his sister, who is my mom, always had problems with each other though they go back to when they were children. Because of this, they never really talked very much in these gatherings. Right as the ceremony was about to start though, he was sitting next to her and started asking her very personal questions about me and my brother. I went over next to them before the ceremony started to make sure that everything was fine and no heads were rolling. He asked me what my plans were after high school though, and when I told him that I was going to college, he started throwing a fit at my sister and asking her where we would get the money. He started getting louder when she told him that they had been saving up for me, and he snapped, telling her that when he told her he was in debt and needed money, she told him that they didn't have any. He started getting louder and louder, telling her that she betrayed him and left him to beg from others while she had the money all along. At first, she tried to explain to him that it was my college fund and they couldn't go near it, but he wouldn't listen. When he didn't, she started yelling back, and when I got in the middle to break up the fight, he got physical with me and we were wrestling each other. The entire attendees were watching and some even started filming, which was extremely awkward. One of the teachers eventually came and separated us from each other, and my dad ran in quickly from the bathroom to restrain him. My mom immediately called the police and they came over and took him away. My graduation ceremony was ruined and my classmates started laughing at me constantly. I was very embarrassed and didn't know what to do, so I apologized to my teachers and ran away from the ceremony. My parents left shortly after to come found me. I ran to the park and just stayed there for an hour trying to unwind from the shame I felt. The one day I was looking forward to so much was completely ruined, and it wasn't even my fault. My parents kept trying to call me but I didn't pick up. I didn't want to talk to any member of my family for some time, and I started blaming them all. I went back that night and refused to talk to anyone in the house and just went up to my room. I didn't care what happened, but I overheard them talking about my uncle being taken to jail and needing bail to get out. I hoped that he would never get out and I resented him so badly. I knew my grandparents would bail him out though, since he was their perfect boy. The next morning, my parents tried to make it up to me and talk to me, but I was too angry and let out my frustration that I never wanted to see him again, and that if he ever comes to the family events, I will not be going. They said that they understood and told me that I wouldn't see him again for a long time. These comments wouldn't age very well, as 3 days later, I was woken up at around 11 p.m. by a very loud man in the street. When I got downstairs, I could hear him yelling about money and betrayal and heard a couple of curse words in there. I got to the porch and it was my uncle, with a bottle in his hand, and he was swaying as a drunk does all around the street. I kept telling him to leave and back off, but he kept on babbling his usual nonsense about conspiracies and the Illuminati and the fact that we were all going to be mind-controlled. My mother got up but didn't want to go out to confront him, and my dad was out of town on business. I kept telling him to leave and that if he didn't, I would call the cops, but he was too drunk to even understand what I was telling him. Eventually, he got too loud and started cursing and throwing his bottle around, so the next door neighbors got up and rushed outside with their big dog, who started barking and chased my uncle, who ran quickly down the street to escape. He got scared this time, but my mom told me that if he ever did this or came around again, she would immediately call the cops. The next day, we went over to my grandparents' house for breakfast. It wasn't long until the topic of my uncle came up and we got into an argument. My mom and I were obviously against him, but my grandparents kept defending him and I had finally had it, and asked them why they were so protective of him and constantly excused him. They sat us down for a long time to tell us all about his childhood and how he lived a sad one that was full of bullying almost every day. They told us that he would come home from school in tears from the bullying and the horrible people he met. My grandparents kept sympathizing with their son because they knew that he lived a long life, but if he had these issues as a child, then it doesn't excuse his attitude at over 40 years old. On the other hand, they talked about how my mom, his sister, was the perfect kid who had a bunch of friends and good grades, and she was the one who made it in life, except for him. They told us that deep down, he resented his sister so much because of her success and his failure. I understood why he was the way he was, but I still couldn't excuse him. While we were sitting down, the doorbell rang and it was him. My mom immediately got defensive, but my grandparents kept trying to calm us down and told us that they invited him so we can talk things out and let everything go. He first apologized for what he had done, and things were civil for a good 10 minutes. He told me how guilty he felt about the graduation and that he would make it up to me, but I didn't believe him. Soon enough, things took a turn and he brought up the whole money and debt thing again and started blaming my mom for not helping him when he was struggling and about to be homeless. Things got out of hand quickly and they both started yelling at each other again, and my grandparents had to step in to break up the fight. He started letting out all his feelings about their childhood and how she never helped him and always wanted to be better, and she told him that he can't make excuses for being a total loser. We both got agitated and left the house to our grandparents' disarray, and she told my uncle that she doesn't want to see him again, and that if he comes over to our house again, she would call the police. In the car on the way back home, we called my dad, who was out of town, and explained the whole thing to him. He got so angry and wanted to go and beat up my uncle and almost cut his business trip short to come and see what was happening. My mom calmed him down though and told him that he was probably not going to bother us again. That night though, he kept calling me over and over and I didn't pick up. I was afraid that he might come and my fear came true. I was in my room when I heard the same drunk and disorderly voice in the street. I woke my mom up and we went to the porch where he was acting the same as he was last time, but this time he was genuinely insulting us and the family and the entire neighborhood. My mom didn't hesitate and called the cops immediately. She made sure to call them in front of him as he was standing, but he was too drunk to even compute what was going on. Eventually, the cops came and literally forced him to the ground and took him away in the squad car. About 20 minutes later, he used his one phone call to call my mom because he was completely brain dead at that point, and she hung up on him. We completely ignored the whole thing as soon as he was taken away, and we didn't even care to know what happened until we were called into the station the second day to clear up the entire situation. Because it had been less than 3 days since his last offense, he got criminally charged and given a year of sentencing. We couldn't care less at that point and decided to let him spend the year in jail that would serve him right. A couple of months passed and things were finally normal. I was applying to different colleges and finally got accepted into a reputable one and was about to get ready to move out. It was a hard decision for me, but one that I had to take, and I kept thinking about how my uncle always kept saying that college was useless and that it doesn't add much to your income and all that stuff. But I thought of it more as a social thing rather than educational, and I wanted to go. One day though, right before I moved out, I was out in the park walking around to clear my head when I heard a voice call out to me. It was my uncle. As soon as I saw him, I pulled out my phone and I was ready to call the cops, as I thought he had escaped from prison or something. He calmed me down first though and told me that the judge had changed his sentence to community service rather than jail time, and that he was in this food back right across from the park. He apologized a million times for what he had done again, but I just nodded my head and didn't accept his apology. I told him that it sucks to be such a slave, which ground his gears a little bit, but he couldn't talk back to me. Right before I left him, I made him a promise that I would be better than him in everything and that I'd never be forced to do something like community service or jail time because I wasn't a half-wit loser. This time the words seemed to affect him and he stopped bothering anyone after this. Now, here is the end of our today's story. I hope you guys are enjoying my daily content. And, in my opinion, OP's uncle is a loser, and I'm glad his wife dumped him before things got worse for her. He's a scheming jerk, and people like him believe they know everything better than others, even when the person opposing them is a professional. OP's grandparents, in my opinion, are the reason he became a manipulative bully. Guys, let me know what's your opinion about OP's uncle and the excuses his grandparents told them to defend their son. Please comment down. So before leaving, please hit the like button and do subscribe to the channel to stay tuned with us for more awesome stories.